Thank you, Chairman Cotton, and thank you for being such a great partner in putting together this hearing on such a critical and important topic. I think our hearing today is our first banking subcommittee hearing this Congress, and I am very pleased that we're starting off exploring the issue of retirement security. You know, I wake up every morning thinking about the men and women in rural America, especially in North Dakota, who play hard, play by the rules, and try to earn an honest living and save for retirement. In fact, their golden years. The working class is the backbone of our country, and they shouldn't have to fear about their retirement future. Unfortunately, the trends we're seeing suggest that retirement security is far more uncertain today than it was even 20 years ago. Only 22% of workers are very confident that they'll have enough money in retirement, according to the Employee Benefit Research Institute. And 64% say they know they're behind in where they should be in their savings. In fact, somewhere between 60 and 70% of all working Americans have access to a workplace retirement account or a 401k. That leaves about 30 million full-time workers without access to a workplace-sponsored plan. And among those who do have access to a 401k, a recent Census Bureau study determined that up to 2/3, let's repeat that again, of those that do have access, up to 2/3 don't put away nearly enough to cover the cost of retirement. This shouldn't come as a surprise, given the fact that about half of all adults in our country would be unable to come up with $400 to pay for an emergency expense. They would have to borrow that money or sell a possession. In my home state of North Dakota, about 41% of all private sector employees, that's roughly 112,000 workers, work for an employer who does not offer a retirement plan. These are the truck drivers, the sales clerks, and the farm workers that are working very hard to make ends meet, put their kids through college, cover health care costs, and provide a better life for their children, thinking they will just put off that decision of their retirement security to tomorrow. We owe it to these men and women to strengthen our retirement system. There's certainly no silver bullet, but we need to think creatively to educate workers and expand access to retirement vehicles so more workers can afford to save and take advantage of the substantial benefits a sponsored retirement plan can offer. We also need to protect the men and women who still have access to a defined benefit plan or a pension as we transition to this new model. This means standing up against cuts to private pension plans like Central States Pension Fund, whose members would economically be devastated if they lose access to the pension benefits that they bargained for and that they earned. As we dive into these issues, I look forward to hearing the testimony of today's brilliant witnesses. I said that just as a moment of suck up. Brilliant witnesses. Senator Kent Conrad, my mentor and great friend, who has spent a lifetime working to help the men and women of this country, and particularly the men and women of North Dakota, achieve economic success. And I'm interested to explore some of the proposals he's put together as part of his work as co-chair of the Commission on Retirement Security and Personal Savings. I am also very eager and grateful for Mr. Mead's testimony and Mr. Mead's appearance. He has some rethinking, he has me doing some rethinking of fundamental ideas that I've had about what we need to do with pensions. There's no doubt that the new economy, where work is taking place in a series of one-off gigs, presents challenges in the retirement space. And we have to develop a model that is realistic for today's economic model, especially at a time when we're really uncertain about what the future of work will look like. So I want to thank both of you for, number one, your enormous work that you've done in the past for our country, in the case of both of you, and the thinking that you've done about the future of the people of the United States of America and how we can improve the economic outlook for them. And so, Mr. Chairman, with that, I look forward to the testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on all of that. You know, there's been a series of reports about automation and about really the future of work. What does the future of labor look like? One report saying we're going to lose 47% of all of our jobs in the next 20 years. I don't know if that's an exaggeration. I think sometimes people write these reports so you can get a big headline and get more attention to the report. But I will tell you, I think things are changing dramatically, as the professor has outlined. The question is, without knowing the future of work and the future of labor, and this is for both of you, can we really design a retirement plan today that will address these concerns? And how nimble do we have to be as we're going through this transition? And I'll start with you, Senator Conrad.
You know, I listened with great interest to Professor Mead's description of what's happened, and I thought he was spot on. If you had to reduce it to a word, I'd reduce it to globalization. But it's really more than that, because it's this remarkable technological revolution that we're going through. You and I have talked about these long-term challenges. What is going to happen to all the truck drivers of America when we have self-driving vehicles? And this is not so far away. What are we going to do to a whole series of other jobs that Professor Mead describes repetitive, in some cases backbreaking, difficult jobs that people have that are being replaced by technology? I mean, I don't know if you've seen the video of a new Tesla plant. 5 minutes, watch what happens there. How few people are involved in the process of building a Tesla automobile. So things are changing very rapidly, and it presents us with a requirement to change how we envision retirement as well. That's one reason we came to this idea of having retirement security plans, to make it much, much easier for those employers who want to offer them, who are small business, because small business is going to continue to be one of the chief job creators in our economy. Make it infinitely easier for them to offer plans. I know from a business family, I remember these discussions in our own family about offering retirement plans, and people wanted to do it, but the administrative hassle and the financial burden were just too great. I mean, it wasn't so much the money that was involved, it was the liability that was involved. So, look, I think we are going to have to be much fleeter in terms of our ability to react to these fundamental changes in the economy, both here and across the globe.
Professor Mead?
Well, your concerns are spot on, Senator. When I think about the jobs of the future, I do say sometimes, you know, in the 1850s, when well over 50% of the workforce earned its living farming, and you'd said, well, now suppose in 100 years only 2% of the workforce will be on farming, the question would be, what on earth are all those people going to do? And no one would have guessed, for example, that there would have been a factory that made fuzzy dice that hung down from car windows, and that people would be making a living in such a factory. So that there are ways in which we can't imagine the future. But I can think of things today. We are rich in goods as a society. Any ancient king or emperor could only dream of the stuff that even the average American family has today. But in services, not so much. I think, for example, my father lives in a retirement center not far from here. Suppose there was somebody there who said to me, if you'll pay me X amount a month, I'll make sure your father's computer is always working, he's always able to use his email, and if there's some kind of issue with the printer or something, we'll be there to help him. There are lots of services. We're seeing some of these proliferate. Certainly when I was a kid, only the Rockefellers had wedding planners. Now that's a real profession, and it enhances the quality of life, and people make a pretty good living helping others celebrate these high moments in their lives.
If we look at kind of the need to have a much more nimble retirement system, you're going to have Craig put up just a chart because I love, I do this with high school kids and college kids that I visit with. I say, what did Albert Einstein say was the greatest invention of the 20th century? Compound interest. And so we put together a chart that shows what happens if people invest early and then stop investing compared to people who would delay that decision later in life, and what does that result in? And you can see that early investment, it makes all the difference in the world if we just get people to do it, if we could just get people to make those investments. But as they're struggling in this transition period of time, am I going to start my own small business? Am I going to, augment my salary or my the work that I do with Airbnb or with Uber? And what does that mean in terms of my retirement? And what are the economic challenges I have today? And this is the challenge that we have as a country, because one thing that we haven't talked about, which is this lack of savings, this lack of retirement security, is not going to go without a cost on the public fisc. Whether it is earlier involvement of Medicaid dollars for assistance, and whether it is food assistance, whether it is Section B housing, or Section A housing, whatever that is, we are going to pay the price for the lack of retirement security in this country. And so I think what I'm grasping with is, I don't know what the future 20 years from now, the work world looks like, so it's hard to design a retirement system around the workplace. And I think, Professor, that's exactly what you're telling us in your testimony, I think.
That's right. And this is why I was trying to imagine this kind of one-stop account where you would set up a specially designated account, and if you're working for Uber and you're working for Airbnb and so on, this money goes into that account, the financial institution does whatever withholding and so on, but also it's at that point of that account where the retirement programs can set in, where there can be the point of you move it away from the employer, which is no longer the center of that person's economic life, and you move it to the person, in a sense.
But that person has to be literate.
We are going to, again, when we went from an agrarian society to an industrial society, people had to get smarter. It's actually harder to live in a city full of immigrants who were different from you than to live in the country where everyone is related to you and you know all the customs. So we actually, and our school system actually changed dramatically as a part of this shift. So yes, we as individuals, as a society, we have to raise our game so that we are producing young people who have the financial literacy, entrepreneurial spirit, all of these elements that can help them to flourish in this new kind of complex environment that's coming into existence around us.
I think the component of all this, and it's like, you can lead a horse to water, but can you get it to drink? Mm-hmm. And there's a couple complexities that we haven't talked about, one of which is choice. There's been a number of sociological studies that say if you give people too many choices, they'll make no choice because it's overwhelming. The other problem that I think is that we keep saying, well, if this account or this opportunity performs the way it has in the past, this is where you'll end up. And there's no certainty to that. So there isn't this idea that if I do this, then I'm guaranteed that that's what it's going to look like when I'm age 65 or age 70, right? So people have this insecurity and they say, live today. I probably won't live long enough, or I'm not going to ever retire. Which really is very problematic. And so I want to talk about another a vehicle that we haven't spent a lot of time talking about and get your reaction to it, and that's low-cost guaranteed annuities. When we look at the defined benefit plans, it's that you knew that at the end of your work life, there would be a guaranteed set sum that would come every month that you could count on, that was predictable, that was taken care of. And my question to both of you is, do you believe that annuities, not annuities with big front-end loads or, a product that reflects Senator Conrad's statement that it should be fiduciary to them, it should be for me. Do you believe that annuities can fill the gap for retirees looking to access some kind of guaranteed minimum income in the years going forward?
I just say, in this whole area of lifetime income options, there is a tremendous opportunity here. And there are lots of models. If you look around the world at what other places are doing, lots of interesting ideas about how you can give people lifetime income options and give them a choice to make. We talk about just-in-time choices. When people are about to make those decisions, to get advice to them at the critical moment that they have a decision to make. When we talk about capability, we talk about people having the basic information. Well, hard to get them taught in high school to prepare for what's to come 30 years from now. But when they're at the moment of choice, getting them help in making those decisions makes a lot of sense and is affordable.
But if we look at, Senator Conrad, if your choice is, here's this high yield fund, it's got more risk or this or that, all of a sudden people go, I don't know enough to make that choice. I'm not going to decide that. I'd rather have, that money today to pay off, the bills that I have, rather than risking that won't ever come in the future. Professor Mead, what do you think about some kind of product that would guarantee monthly income at a low cost?
Well, I think that it has a place in retirement planning, and I think you're right that simplifying options is important. I think there are other elements of this sort of, hesitation about saving and investing, and I agree with you that this is an important barrier, because we see that there are these products that people aren't, there are plans that they're not participating in, even though they have the option. One thing that I think is worth looking at is the Singapore approach to this, where there is an account which you can use, you have to have an account, but you can use it for different things, including some are really annuity type products, but you can also use it towards a down payment or even the part of the principal payment of housing.
So, Professor Mead, how do they? Is this structured as a mandate or is this structured as an option in Singapore?
In Singapore, it's a mandate that you
like
must
have
this.
Singapore.
Right, exactly. And you must smile. Yes,
and not spit on the sidewalk.
Please do not. Don't scratch cars with keys either, I'm told. So but the way they have a home ownership rate now of about 90% in Singapore, because if you have to put this money away, but you can put it in different purposes, people do have some freedom. So this is. So
it would include things that build wealth for the family.
And so the system is you have to maintain a certain balance in your account before you can do certain discretionary things, but you can count property value against that core amount. So I think we can actually we can think much more flexibly about what we do. And we're fortunate now. When the U.S. started Social Security, there were some similar examples, but it was a pretty simple menu of choices that existed. Today, a number of countries around the world have tried very different approaches, so I think we might as well benefit from the experience.
I just want to say I think this is something everybody needs to check ideology at the door, all of the stuff, and look with very clear vision. What's going to happen in the next 20 years as we transition away from defined benefit plans to a society that's not saving for retirement, and we need to look at what works. not what fits within an ideology. And that is a critical component. But we need to understand the human dynamic of choice and why it's difficult for people to see value in making a choice of saving for retirement. But I look forward to learning more about the Singapore plan and more about your reaction to Senator Conrad's report. I think it sounds like there's some merging of ideas here, and then how can we effectuate that, either working with the private sector to develop products or looking at, we do it typically through tax incentives, but also taking a look at how we can make this a social norm that we're saving for retirement and not necessarily an anomaly, which we're beginning to see that it is. I want to just ask a question. You guys have just been, just thought-provoking testimony and really quite enjoyable hour and a half. I think both Senator Cotton and I are deadly serious about this topic. Want just a couple pieces of advice from both of you on if you were sitting, not where you're sitting, but sitting back on this side of the dais, what would be your next steps? And we'll start with you, Senator Conrad.
Well, organize and educate are always my two notions of how you get something done around here. I think there's just a tremendous opportunity here, and I really applaud the two of you for doing this in a bipartisan way, because as I learned, very little happens around here unless it's done in a bipartisan way. Even less is sustainable unless it's done in a bipartisan way. And these are issues that really shouldn't be partisan. There is no reason that it should be partisan to expand opportunities for people to participate in retirement plans at work. There's no reason that it should be partisan to change the incentive systems that we have in Social Security to encourage people to work longer. There's nothing partisan about it. So I would say those would be my observations.
Professor Mead.
Well, I would second that, and I would add to it, I would try to remind my colleagues, if I were in your situation, that we see a lot of lack of trust today between so-called elites and the folks in the grassroots. One of the reasons that that's the case is because of the failures of national systems like the retirement system. People don't expect the government to guarantee them affluence, but they do expect to have a system that if they play by the rules and do their part, it brings them to a decent result. And the sense that somehow something as fundamentally important to the lives of the American people as our retirement system, we have not yet put the kind of effort and diligence into constructing and repairing that system. It is a message from Washington to the folks out there that we don't care. So I would urge you to impress the importance of this issue on your colleagues as a concrete kind of governance issue that can help rebuild the faith of the American people in our democratic system, and that's really something that we need to do.